In today's lesson, you're going to learn how to slay Riff by Mighty Riff, Bhima's theme by Ohm. What's going on? My name's Jered. Welcome to Beholden to the Riff, the heaviest bass lessons on YouTube. Thank you so much for checking out this video. This video is part 2 of the Bhima's theme bass lessons. You can check out part 1. There's a link in the description below. So in part 2, we're going to go through the interlude section where it's pretty much just Al and a killer clean tone. We're going to be using our thumb, our fingers, everything. The tuning in this one is kind of unique. It's a drop D tuning using 432 hertz as the reference frequency for the note A. And as one of my private bass students pointed out, 432 hertz is actually the frequency of Ohm. Before we get into the lesson, I'd like to give a special thank you to the newest Patreon members. We have Brad Cooley, Dustin Bateman, and Jean-Henry Weldon. So if you want to hop on board and become a patron, there's a link in the description below. And I actually posted a tuning guide on how to tune your guitar or bass to the 432 hertz frequency. Really quick, really easy. So grab your axe, tune to drop D with the Ohm frequency, and let's do it. So there's a few key things that are going on during this interlude part. First thing is we're going to be using our thumb, and it's going to be playing the A string as kind of a drone note. And for the most part, it's going to be playing on all the strong beats. So the 1, 2, 3, 4. Next thing is most of the action is happening on the D string on the 5th and 7th frets. We're going to come up to the 8th fret every once in a while, and we're going to sneak up to the 10th fret a few times. Just like in part 1, there's going to be a lot of hammer-ons, pull-offs, and those quick Cisneros kind of grace notes. These. So there's a bunch of times where we'll be playing 2 notes at once. They'll both be happening on the A and D strings, and it's going to be the open A up against another one of the notes. When we play the drone notes, we're going to try to let them ring out as long as possible. So it's like... as opposed to... The main phrase underneath kind of all of it is going to revolve around this here, this. As we come into the interlude part, we're pretty much outlining that main phrase. So the first measure is going to revolve around the octave, which is going to be open A, and the 7th fret on the D string. It's also our root note. The 3rd note is going to be one of those quick hammer-ons from 5 to 7. And as we play the first note here, this on the 5th fret, we're going to play the open A with our thumb and the D string with our first finger, and then hammer on to 7. So here's that first measure. Second measure, we'll be using our thumb, playing that open A on pretty much all the strong beats. Here it is nice and slow. So on the D string, we'll be playing. And we'll be playing open A on all the strong beats. So on the D string, I'll be using my first and second fingers, pretty much alternate picking this whole thing while hitting those open A's with my thumb. Next measure is pretty much like the first. Here's the third measure, nice and slow. So on the D string, we'll be playing. While, once again, accenting the strong notes with our open A. Next measure, we switch up the open A string a little bit, and we kind of use it as a counterpoint to what's happening on the D string here. So I'll just play it nice and slow. One more time. So we're not really playing like chords, two notes at the same time, but using it just kind of bounce back and forth. By doing that, it creates like a polyrhythm within the measure. So there's two rhythms happening at the same time. We have 3 beats happening on the open A, while the D string kind of maintains that groups of 4. So it's like. Next measure, we're going to create a bunch of tension by playing the open A and the 5th fret. Really dissonant sounding chord. Here it is nice and slow. So cool, really starts to warble there. So D string is going. Here they are together. Next measure, we're going to get up to the 8th fret. We'll use our pinky. So the thumb's still playing the open A on the strong beats, and we'll just be going on the D string. So the measure starts with one of those quick hammer-ons, and then we immediately go back to the open A, treating it not as a drone note, but as kind of a note to push it forward a little bit. So here's the first half. So we play 3rd fret, A string, 5th fret, G string, hitting that octave. Second half of the measure starts open A, then we're going to be using 5th fret, A and D strings. Here's the full measure. The second phrase is building on that first phrase. Gets a little bit busier, but pretty much the same melody till we get towards the end. So here's the first 2 measures, nice and slow. So the first measure, we've played something exactly like this. So here's the second measure. D string will be doing and A string will be hitting the strong notes. So it's third measure, we'll be doing a quick hammer on from 7th to 8th fret and then pull off back to 7th fret. So the D string, all the while playing the strong beats with our thumb, and the D string comes in on the and, so we play the open A. So here's the fourth measure. Seems pretty familiar. Fifth measure, similar territory. Here's what we have so far. So it's going to be the first 5 measures of the second phrase. So here's the next measure. We'll be sliding up to the 10th fret in this one. So the D string goes, while the A string's rocking those strong beats. So while playing this, I like to start the slide from the 5 to the 7 and kind of make the shift in position here. Then use second finger to slide up to 10. Just to be on the safe side, I try not to slide too much with my pinky. It's a 50-50 shot of sounding right. So I like to slide using, my first, second, or third fingers. And so by playing the slide from 5 to 7, kind of sets it up so I can use my second finger to slide up to the 10th. Here's the next measure. Kind of that polyrhythmic feel in this one too. So it's a hammer-on pull-off from 7, 8, 7. Then next up is the turnaround. We'll be using that same 3/5 octave and 5/5 on the A and D strings, just like in that first phrase. So here it is, nice and slow. So it's kind of the same thing. We're just going to vary when we play these 5th frets. So here it is one more time. So here's the first measure. We've seen something very similar to this before. Second measure switches it up a little bit. We're going to go from 7th fret to 8th fret on the D string. And we kind of let it hang there for a beat. Very cool. Here it is, nice and slow. Here's the next measure. So he throws in that 5th fret A and D string right at the end, spices it up a little bit here. Leads into the 7th fret at the beginning of the next measure. Next measure, familiar territory. do that slide up to 10th. This time he plays it slightly different, goes 5 to 7, then slides from 7 to 8, then it's the same. So here it is one more time. Ends the same way with this quick hammer-on pull-off on the D string, 7th fret. So the last measure of this phrase, kind of the turnaround, changes up a little bit. We're not going to be using the 3rd fret at all. It's all happening on the 5th frets, A, D, and G strings. I like to play all this 5th fret instead of barring it with individual fingers, just to kind of reduces the muddiness of it. Here's the first measure, nice and slow. So it shakes up the feel a little bit here on the last phrase. We'll be using the A string still as a drone, but it's going to have more drive to it. So we come in with this minor 7th right here, this 5th fret. So we got the double A in the middle there. Next measure is pretty familiar. So the D string goes. So we'll be doing that 5th fret back up to 5th fret here. So cool. Next measure. So once again, letting it hang on this minor 7th, this 5th fret. Then sneaking in the 5th fret on the A string here. Next measure, similar to things we've played before. This time, instead of landing on the 5th fret on the D string, we'll be landing the 5th fret on the A string. Next measure. Next measure, doing the slides. So here's that last measure. Starts 7th fret, D string. You could pull off here, or you could slide, make it a little easier, because we'll be playing the 5th fret, A string. So we go. So the first measure starts out, we're going to play the open A and the 9th fret on the D string. So this is going to be an octave. And this part is so cool. It's so hypnotic. and it gives me the vibe of this like those Tibetan, the Buddhist, what are the handheld bells that they ring, and they ward off evil spirits, and it's kind of used for like a spiritual cleansing. Probably a conscious choice made by Al here, given the subject matter of most of their tunes. Anyway, here's the first thing. It's I was trying to get it to even sound more like a bell when I was learning it, by kind of it's not quite a slap, but more like almost like a pick and a. Last couple were okay. So second measure starts out with that octave, very similar to things we've played before. Actually does it a couple times. Coming up on the, what do we got? Sixth measure, we're going to walk up to the 10th fret on the D string, let it hang there, gets a little uncomfortable, a little warbly, and then we bring it back. So on the D string, it's going to go. All together with the open A, it goes. Here's the whole section as he's singing, nice and slow. So good. So good. So this is kind of the fifth time around playing this same part, that kind of incantation kind of feel, just hypnotizing, lulling you into this kind of space. And everything's the same up until the last measure. So it starts with the octave. Then we do open A, 7th fret on the A string, 5th fret on the D string. Leads back into the octave. This next part is pretty much identical to something we've already played, so I'm just going to run through it. Third measure is a little different, but it's just kind of hammering on that octave. Kind of picking things up a little bit. So here it is all the way through. So here's the next section all the way through, a little slower than game speed. So pretty much all things we've played before, it's just now they're kind of all crammed together in one measure or in one phrase. So much busier. I mean, we start out right away this. So here's the last phrase of that kind of clean interlude section. This is the Lazarus section. This is the part where I started hearing those bells. Lot of that, octave thing happening here. Nothing we haven't played before. So I'm just going to go ahead, play it all the way through. Thank you so much for checking out the video. Really hope the lesson helped you out. And if you want to learn the song, we got links to free tab downloads in the description below, as well as links to the baddest t-shirt on the planet. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Extol the solar rays to rise in solid